Welcome and thank you for joining us today. I am Adriana Chavez, a faculty member at Columbia University. I'm going to present the studio Resilient Belize, Envisioning Climate Justice for Mesoamerican Reef Communities, developed during the spring semester of 2022 at the Master in Architecture and Urban Design within Columbia University Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation. The studio was a collaboration with the Columbia University Center for Resilient Cities and Landscape, the University of Belize, the Government of Belize through Belize Coastal Zone Management Authority and Institute, and the Resilient Reefs Initiative from the Great Barrier Reef Foundation. Before moving into the presentation, I also want to acknowledge the faculty team, Kate Orff, the studio coordinator, Kita Meta, Tarios Pawlowski, Lorena Bello, Victoria Bono, and Joanna Lovecchio, along the 43 students from the GSAPP MAUD class of 2022. In this presentation, you'll see a short recap of some of the projects developed and presented by former students and teaching assistants, Cesar, Abani, Carmen, Galina, and Lucas. Our studio looked at the Mesoamerican Reef System and their communities by testing the implementation of water-sensitive coastal zoning proposed by the Belize Coastal Zone Management Plan in a range of sites and systems through iterative spatial design. We work across coastal transects that include upland tropical forest protection measures to new urban design opportunities, sustainable fisheries management, to innovative green infrastructure finance models and reef restoration. The studio kicked off with an immersive workshop to understand the challenges from experts in the environmental, spatial, and social issues in Belize. Here in the screen, you can see some of our guest speakers and stakeholders. Now, I'm going to pass it on to Cesar.
Thank you, Adriana. During the workshop, we learned that Belize is a success story and a role model in climate and biodiversity action. The precedent efforts inspired us to develop these 12 design principles for the studio that responded directly to the reef resilience assessment under 3 large umbrellas: ecosystems, community, and governance. It is important to say that Belize's cultural and environmental diversity is a global treasure that hosts the Mesoamerican Reef, the largest barrier system in the Western Hemisphere, making it part of the world's cultural heritage. Coastal communities rely on this diverse ecosystem for protection from storms and erosion, local jobs, recreation, and food production. But this treasure is being threatened. Climate change has greatly endangered flora and fauna in Belize. Sea level is expected to rise between around 12 inches in the next 30 years. All of this threatens the coral reefs and mangroves forest, causes extensive coastal edge erosion, and littoral forest loss, endangering the livelihoods of not only sea life, but humans that depend on the delicate system in Belize. From the perspective of tourism, community, industries, and ecology, we located 11 sites that engage in a combination of these complex issues to test our 12 design principles in a range of spatial conditions. We determined 5 umbrella policies for coastal development and directed design proposals based on the specific characteristics of the sites. As a whole, we call for Climate Reparations Fund to invest on systems for resilience, and the other 4 umbrella policies define clusters of proposals that will be presented today. Let's start with the first one, Abni.
The first umbrella policy, the Caribbean Sustainable Tourism Pact, explores policies for conscious tourism that support the local economy while simultaneously protecting Belize's heritage and natural environment. The Caribbean islands act as critical infrastructure that shelter and protect Mexico and Belize from wind, waves, and hurricanes. As you can see from the red lines, a majority of the hurricanes lose their intensity as they hit the mainland. However, extractive pressures of tourism and real estate speculation have disrupted these natural ecosystems. To combat this, we propose a National Park Alliance composed of the barrier islands that designates them as protected areas. Using Key Cocker as a pilot site, this proposal seeks to revile the existing dredged harbors and cleared lands through a framework of knowledge production, conservation, and scientific tourism. By 2080, as you can see, the island will have fully transitioned to a resilient habitat through instituting managed retreat, creating a living coastline, and restoring mangrove cover. Three main strategies are used to restore the connections from ridge to reef ecosystems. Existing buildings are retrofitted and adapted to combat sea level rise by adding stilts and elevated walkways. Mangrove nurseries around the island accelerate their growth and restore forest cover. Working together at the harbor's edge, this integrated mangrove ecosystem provides nurseries for fishes and enriches the marine life. Systems of climate monitoring, hurricane warning, weather tracking, and carbon sequestration all provide data on how to create this dynamic living edge. Tools of community science are used to increase civic engagement and empower the local community. Integrating into existing systems, the new residential clusters accommodate homestays, allowing the tourists to immerse themselves within the local culture. Communal dining around local food production and production of local handicrafts strengthens social bonds, enabling stronger interaction between the locals, tourists, and nature. Further along this transect are underwater field sites for conducting scientific diving protocols, monitoring the intertidal zone and reef health, and coral hospitals to understand processes of recovery and conservation. Using this long-term landscape-based framework, we build on and amplify synergies across ecology, economy, and culture. The future resilient landscape blurs boundaries between human and natural, restoring the inherent interconnectedness of systems. Now moving on to cluster policy 2, Galina.
Thank you, Avani. So in our second umbrella policy, we explore opportunities for land tenure security and local stewardship to generate wealth within communities through a national framework for community land trust. And this project that I'm going to explain explores adaptive strategies in central Belize, from Belize City to Belmopan. And in our research, we discovered a World Bank publication illustrating a top-down master plan for Belize City. And this concept is an example of a master plan that would continue to degrade crucial ecological assets and heritage and cause flooding inequalities for local communities. In contrast, we propose a living corridor to form along both the Western Highway and the Saiban-Belize River watersheds to connect Belizeans to concentrated public works and municipal resources. So we propose a long-term resilience framework that prepares for climate change and sustains growth in central Belize by implementing 3 core strategies that are adaptive. This includes a decarbonized corridor, community land trust, and nature-based growth. Within Belize City, we have 3 proposed sites that include the local fishers market and nearby bus station, which marks one end of the regional corridor. And the third site takes place in a low-income neighborhood at the edge of an urban and mangrove forest. And our first site really includes the existing Conchel Bay fish market and the surrounding neighborhood, which is currently affected by flooding. So by 2030, we propose to establish a Hollover Creek land trust that will work with voluntary households to move away from flood-prone areas while retrofitting existing houses for adaptation. And so by rethinking our relationship to water, existing structures may be adapted as amphibious structures or floating structures to expand market and pavilion space, creating a vibrant waterfront park in 2080. Naturalized water edges would be able to absorb storm surges and create a multimodal infrastructure that really doubles as recreational use. And our second site is located at the existing bus terminal. With the current transportation infrastructure currently strained in Belize, we envision an expanded transit hub that would be adapted with renewable energy sources and social infrastructures. So really in our vision, transit hubs will be established as a public investment anchor across corridor communities, which can grow to include social amenities and training center to benefit the local economy, linking communities along the Western Highway corridor. So in 2080, we believe Belize City's transportation infrastructure can be decarbonized and settlement patterns redefined by limiting urban sprawl and establishing an ecological growth boundary. And finally, our third site is the Hollover Creek Land Trust, which is located in a low-income neighborhood in Belize City. And this trust really aims to stabilize affordable housing options for local residents, while also adapting existing structures from storm surge. So by establishing a community land trust framework, we set in motion tools to adapt in place and equitably densify Belize City. And so by leveraging the existing Western Highway and Hulliver Creek infrastructure, we can really establish a co-beneficial relationship between urban and corridor communities. Now I will pass it on to Lucas to discuss the blue economy.
Thank you. So based on the blue economy, 3 groups were looking into ecosystem repair and restoration, land and marine conservation, renewable energy, sustainable fisheries, but most importantly, ways to reduce our carbon footprint. Our group had San Pedro as a study site, and we started by zooming in on 4 different site conditions we were dealing with in the town, comparing satellite images from 1984 and now. The main differences over time are loss of public space, sea level rise, the hardening of shore edges, and intense densification. So together with Yasmin, Julia, and Sam, our goal was that through urban design and technology, we could transition from ghost reefs to coral nurseries coupled with renewable energy sources, such as offshore wind turbines. And getting to zero emissions and being independent means changing from fossil fuels towards clean energy that is nested within the urban fabric, while adapting and mitigating external factors. Our in-water strategies included a combination of floating solar panels modules and ecological systems, sitting in a lagoon surrounded by mangrove nurseries for ecological restoration. When fully implemented, it would offset any energy imported from Mexico. Our second strategy was an offshore wind farm, taking advantage of the high-end concept east winds. The turbines would be located near the coral barrier to help create an artificial reef system. On the other hand, inland strategies reimagined San Pedro as an enriched public realm that existed alongside nature-based practices. A transitional landscape with dense mangrove vegetations in between elevated pathways would allow for bird habitats, fisheries production, and carbon sequestration, in addition to areas for cultural expression and export activities. At the town core center, the vehicle accessible streets aim for 50% more permeable surfaces and an enlarged central bioswale to filter rainstorms. In the future, parcel by parcel ground floor retreat might also be necessary depending on sea level rise, with a trade-off for zoning easements that allowed for building an additional floor above. And finally, on the other side, the new enhanced shore side would be able to bring energy into the public eye with photovoltaic shading devices, electric boats, and water collection within pavilions. While a shorter beach with elevated boardwalks in the future could provide for protection against rising waters, it could also channel water into proper drainage networks. So now for our last umbrella policy, Carmen.
Thank you. In our final umbrella policy, Ridge to Reef National Park, we address poor waste management causing downstream water pollution, as well as physical boundaries that can also act as major political boundaries. The proposed binational park extends out from the Rio Hondo connecting Mexico and Belize, where the shape of the park follows the watershed and projected floodline to buffer the river's edge from agricultural runoff and development. Within the park, we propose ecotourism through foot trails as well as a bus route shown in the red loop that utilizes the existing highway infrastructure to connect our chosen pilot sites of Santa Elena, Chanchen, and Sakchan. To establish our vision, we are proposing a series of chronological strategies that first establishes a binational park, which the Rio Hondo watershed is no longer recognized as a physical division, rather an unbounded binational connection that extends the porous radiance of communal spirit and culture to allow countries from opposing sides to learn from one another. We imagine the introduction of a local coalition center that would serve as the catalyst in preparation and becoming a receiver town in the future events of sea level rise. Shown here are one of the proposed coalition centers on the site of Santa Elena to implement ecological and communal strategies. This image is a projected future of the site in which mangrove restoration has been successfully implemented within the community to improve water quality, bringing back former ecology such as the highlighted manatee that typically migrates down the Rio Hondo. Each one of these sites is anchored as a connection through the establishment of the coalition centers, which serves as spaces to interact and learn. Within each coalition center, education, research, and congregational moments invite the community to come together. As time progresses, the sea level rise would become a more threatening reality. The introduction of coalition centers creates a community hub within the area that would strengthen connections between villages along the Rio Hondo and prepare to receive an influx of people from coastal cities. Mexico and Belize both sit on the Yucatan Peninsula, which is rich in Mayan culture. Shown in the drawing is the ceiba tree and the Mayan pyramid, both of which served as nodes of knowledge that emphasize community and ecological importance. The Mayans developed their own calendar in which the tun equates to 1 year, katun 20 years, and bakatun 395 years, which is centered around the ecosystems rather than that of the human lifespan. Mayan culture emphasizes how we as humans are a part of various systems, considering that each is interconnected, informs, influences, and inspires the next. Thank you so much for listening to us. We will share with you a link to our studio story maps so you can explore the full series of proposals with detail. And we look forward to answering any questions that you might have.